Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. You can hear me now, right, Mark? Please, anybody tell me they can hear me. I was having technical difficulties, and since I'm the only one here, I don't have anybody to help me. All right, cool. Thank you for everybody telling me you hear me. So apologies for the late start, a couple minutes late. Had some technical difficulties, of course. It just happens, the demo gods, right before I was due to start. So I apologize, everybody. Thank you. All the people saying they can hear me. Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and actually just back up a second. Normally, right, I have these the other. Second. This was part of also what threw me off. Wrong talk. Gosh, I wish I could just start over, but it doesn't work that way. Doing it live. So give me just a second. Oh, where did it go? Oh, goodness gracious. So this is the sausage being made. Welcome to seeing the sausage. Again, normally I'd be the one organizing everything, and all this would be done and ready to go before the presentation, and the speaker and I would have already had everything set up and ready to go. So as soon as we click the button, we just go. But this time didn't work out. All right. So not that this is incredibly important, but if I could start now, you say, can you do better resolution than 720p? I'm not controlling your resolution. I don't have any control over that. Would any of you else chime in to say you're seeing a similar problem that Nicholas is reporting? I believe you'll find that that's something you control in your Zoom, in your YouTube interface. You click the little gear icon and you'll see you can control your bandwidth. Okay. All right. So I'm going to wait and see if there's a reply to that, but let's go ahead and get started again. If I wish I could start over, this would be where we should start. So hello, everybody, and welcome to another presentation of the online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Arehart, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And this edition of the Meetup being recorded on Thursday, June 8th, 2023 at noon Eastern time. We've got me doing our number 301 episode. And this talk will be on the many ways to run CF or Lucee. Now, before I get started, I see others chiming in, saying what you're saying. No one's ever said there's any limitation on the bandwidth. Now, there's not even anything I can control. I've never heard of it. So I apologize, everybody. All I can say is let's hope that it's not the issue for everybody. Let's hope that whatever's wrong, we'll figure it out. Let me say also that I'm using the same setup I've been using for the past, couple dozen meetups. I do want to apologize to everybody that it's been several months since we had the last meetup. Lots of reasons for that. Let's not get into it. But the bottom line is I wanted to get started with getting one going. So this is the one I put together. And can you please hide the sharing link on the screen? Yeah, again, apologies. That's not something I would normally be even seeing. Thank you for that. And let me say also, I'm going to ditch the, actually, they offer a new layout there. It's a little better, but I'll just go ahead and ditch the camera. That at least helps zoom in the screen. That's all I can do. Again, let me say converse content. Cal, can you clarify what you mean by converse content? And thank you, Nicholas, for observing that, yes, YouTube might increase the bandwidth after the meeting starts. Again, that would be all new behavior. No one's ever complained about this sort of stuff previously. But anyway, let's go ahead and get going. The important part is the content, right? And I do apologize if this turns out, if I see in the recording that somehow there was some terrible implication and it looks just terrible, I could repeat the session in the future, but I hope that all is well covers content. Oh, you meant the hide button. Yeah, sure. So let's move on. Just quickly, so as I like to remind people, the ColdFusion Meetups, you can share the word about it. It's at coldfusionmeetup.com. That's where the announcements happen. That's where the URLs are offered. This meeting is being recorded. That URL you've used is the meeting URL, and I do post the URLs for the meetings at recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com, and I'll do that after this session. And then if you're ever interested in presenting a topic, I welcome anybody to talk on any topic, and you can do that learn more about doing that at speak.coldfusionmeetup.com. Cool. Let's go ahead and move on to the real content that we're here for. All right. Cool. All right. So moving on. 10 minutes in. Goodness. I will try to make it fit within 50 minutes. I think we can. And that's okay. So there's quick insight about how to reach me. If you have any follow-up questions, I'll talk a little more about that stuff later. But there you go. There it is, captured for you to look at. So let's move on to the talk. So who might you be? And you might wonder, well, why is that an important question? Well, it's a very important question in this talk because I'm telling you, I do this stuff every day with people, with clients, a couple hundred active clients a year, in the community, on multiple various means, forums, and social media. There's people all over the map on their levels of experience, on what they do and don't know, years of ColdFusion or years of Lucee, knowing about Lucee or only using Lucee, not knowing about ColdFusion. So I'm going to try to cover all those audiences and Commandbox, and we'll get back to all that later. But let me move on and say, you could be a developer, you could be an administrator, you might be doing both, or you might have some other role, and that can influence things. I see Mark saying that he thinks it's a StreamYard setting. Well, again, I've never, ever had to change any StreamYard setting regarding bandwidth. Let me just take a quick look, and the camera resolution, but we're not talking about the camera. General, I apologize. I just want to take care of it. Broadcast quality, it is fixed at 720. I can't change it. Now, maybe that's something they've changed since the last time we had a session. Maybe they've decided to drop down the available audio quality or the video quality. If that's the case, and if this looks terrible to everybody, and if the recording reflects it as well, we're going to have to deal with it. Now, someone says, there's an echo. No, I don't have the audio playing in 2 tabs. I don't have any audio playing in my ear at all. Does anybody other than Drew hear an echo? Again, I apologize, everybody, for all this crap. It's this sort of stuff that if I was having a presenter, we'd be dealing with it with them, and perhaps had seen it before you guys even came on. Yeah, now we're not talking about how it looks, though. We're talking about yeah, okay, good. So you're saying no echo. Great. Thank you. So, Drew, whatever your echo issue was. Yeah, and he says, Drew, I had to mute YouTube. It's all good. So I don't, maybe you have some, I mean, if you mute YouTube, you're not going to hear me. I don't quite get how that would be the solution. But anyway, thanks everybody for saying things are well. Otherwise, we got to move on. And I'll leave you guys to help each other in the chat. So you may have any of these roles, and that's important to understand, because also where you come from in regard to what you do for a living will really seriously influence what you think is important and what you think you need to know about and what you think nobody else needs to bother worrying about. And I just want to say, beware, everybody's got different roles. And you may be a user of CF, or you may be a user of Lucee, or you may be a user of both. And trust me, not everybody is in all 3 camps. So there's different people in different camps, and that influences how people perceive this stuff that I'm about to talk about. And you may primarily, or maybe even only, use Commandbox to run your CF engine, whether it's CF or Lucee. And I just want to say that's going to influence you. You think, well, that's all there is. That's all we need to know. Why are we even having this talk? But that's not, unfortunately, the way everybody else works. And some people need to, and in their experience, only worked with using CF or Lucee implemented by some installer process. And so I'm saying, I realize that people, for example, that are Commandbox people go, well, who runs installers anymore? We just started up a Commandbox. We'll talk about that. That's one of the options. But there are people who do still only ever implement CF or Lucee with their installer. Conversely, there's others who go, I don't even use an installer. Both CF and Lucee offer a zip-based install process. And if you didn't know it, yes, it's not just Lucee. ColdFusion also, you can just get a zip. It's a couple hundred meg. You drop it in, extract it, and we'll talk about that later. And then some of you only ever use silent or automated install processes. You don't do any of those things above. And I'm just saying, if you do, you didn't maybe know about, or maybe don't think anybody should care about those other approaches. But I'm trying to tell you, there's lots of people in different audiences. And then I want to say there are some of you, because I work with some of them, who only have CF implemented on their machines by using CF Builder, the old version of CF Builder, in 2018 and maybe in 2016. It offered, hey, you want me to install ColdFusion for you? And it implemented it inside of ColdFusion Builder. And I'm just saying that if you've only used that, you're like, well, what installer are you talking about? I just use ColdFusion Builder. And so different people have different perspectives. And I'm not saying that any of them are right or wrong. I'm just saying beware when we're talking about this stuff. Don't presume everybody's with you on how you see things to be. And really, a lot of people, believe it or not, are using CF that was implemented by somebody else. Might be a VM that's been given, might be a server that they're connected to, might be deployed as a WAR file, might be hosted, might be in the cloud, might be in containers. They may have literally nothing to do with getting CF the engine or Lucee the engine or Commandbox working. They just put their code somewhere and it runs. And what I'm trying to say is those people would also have a flavor or a perspective of how they see how this whole subject of how do you run CF. Everybody's going to have a different perspective on these things. And I'm just saying there's a lot of such perspectives, and one size doesn't fit all. You maybe didn't even realize there were all these options. And it's easy to presume that the way you work is the way everyone works. And I'm just telling you that's not true. And then you may even wonder, well, why doesn't everybody work the way I work? And trust me, there's segments of each of those audience I just talked about where they tend to think, well, this is the way everybody should do it. And they really don't want to hear about other discussions. And it's often when I'm trying to give talks or write blog posts about some facet of using something, people will go, well, you wouldn't even need to do that if you did this or that. I understand that. And I'm not denying that there's these options. I'm just saying that when people face the prospect of considering ways to do things, all the audiences should understand that there are these various options, and these options have their reasons for existing. And there can be legitimate reasons. Maybe they need to mimic how something or somebody that they work with already works, right? So if their production was implemented with a server deployment of an install of ColdFusion or of Lucee, they may need to simulate that in their local development environment or testing environment, in which case, for example, Commandbox wouldn't be the right solution for them because that's going to be a very different result. Now, you might say, well, it runs the same code. And I agree. I totally get it. This is not a Commandbox versus other stuff. I'm just bringing that up because that's an example of where somebody might say, I just use Commandbox for development. Well, some people need to simulate in their local or testing environment what's in production. And I know Commandbox can be used for production. Let's not go there. We'll talk about that later. But if somebody has a production server or VM or hosted server or, again, cloud deployment, whatever, it doesn't matter. If they want to mimic how that works, or some of the colleague that they're working with has a problem and they're trying to simulate it, right? I'm just saying that's a reason that people might want to use one or the other approach. Somebody else might tell you how you must work, and that you just got to realize that not everybody has the freedom to decide I'm going to use X. They might be told, no, you got to work this way. And I've got several ways that we're going to talk about, and any one of them may be the way that somebody tells you got to do it. And if that's what you got to do, it's what you got to do. And then, of course, some people simply prefer to work the way they do, and they maybe even they may want to work the way most other people they work with do, right? Whatever their crowd is, wherever their community is, wherever they get help from, maybe consultants they work with or colleagues, they just may prefer to work the way that they think everybody else does. So they're going to lean that way. And again, nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, be aware. These are all going to influence how people feel about this stuff. And then there's also, you might need specific benefits of each of the approaches. And I was about to go to that, but I just looked and I saw Michael. Michael said, I dream of a time when getting Lucee up and running isn't my problem. Well, there you go. I mean, there are some people who would say, well, it's not my problem. Somebody else takes care of it. And not everybody has that luxury, right? So this is all about helping people who either don't have that luxury or might have reason to contemplate which way would I want to go. Is there a benefit of one way or another? And that leads nicely into the next thing I want to talk about, some other reasons. Maybe you want to better automate the deployment of your CFML, right? So if all you've ever done is install CF and you go through the full installer, maybe the GUI installer or the console installer, you go, oh man, that's a pain in the butt. Every time I got to install CF, I got to go through all this crap. That shouldn't be necessary. Well, it's not necessary. You don't have to do that. There are ways to automate deployment of your CFML engine, whether it's ColdFusion, whether it's Lucee, whether it's Commandbox, all that stuff can be automated. We'll talk about that. Maybe you want to deploy into containers or via orchestration like Kubernetes. And I know some of you know that's true, but trust me, there's people I work with every day who go, wait, what? We can run ColdFusion in containers? And then others go, yeah, Commandbox can do it. And I'm like, wait, yes, Commandbox can do it. But Adobe and Lucee also offer their own images. So I'm not, again, this is not versus Commandbox. I'm just saying the Commandbox community tends to be very vocal and tends to want to point out that they've got it all covered, and that's wonderful. But I'm saying that's not the only way. And I'm just talking about big picture. Bottom line is, yes, there are ways to deploy CF via containers. We'll talk about that. And then that allows you to implement that as part of a CI/CD workflow in a nice general way, or it allows you to leverage serverless deployment, and we'll talk about that. And then some people want to be able and need to, maybe they work in an environment where they have to deploy on something that only works with WAR files, web application archive files. Well, let's not talk about that now, but I'm just saying you might work in an environment where they go, give me a WAR file. And you're like, what? Well, if you don't know what that is and didn't know it was possible, you might say, oh, crap, we can't run our ColdFusion on that WebSphere, WebLogic, Glassfish, Jetty server. And no, you absolutely can, because both CF and Lucee support deployment as WAR files. And Commandbox runs on the covers on WAR files. Anyway, moving on, you might also want to be able to test against more than one CFML engine at a time on a server, or, of course, across different versions of an engine. And I want to say you can absolutely do that on one machine. You can run multiple versions of CF, versions of Lucee, CF and Lucee. And I just want to say Commandbox isn't the only way. It's a way, but it's not the only way. And that's another part of what I'm trying to communicate here, is just for the sake of everybody, regardless of where they're coming from. That's my point. Hear me right. I'm not contending really. I'm just saying wherever you are, you may be surprised to find that there are solutions for you that don't require you change the way you work. Just be aware that there is this option, and maybe it's a slight variation on how you work. And this will make more sense as we get through the rest of the talk. Lastly, somebody might just say, hey, I just want to run a quick and dirty test of some CFML. Maybe I want to run it against, I work on CF 2021, but I hear 2023 came out. I'd like to see what would happen if I did this. Or I work on Lucee all day, but I hear people saying that this thing that I can do in Lucee doesn't work in CF. I'd like to just try that. Can it work in CF? There are a couple ways that you might be surprised to hear about that you could do that without having to install CF, not even deploy it even on your own server. So again, that's a big, long discussion that leads to this whole presentation. Now, before we move on, I just want to say we're going to have a mix of overview of stuff, and I was going to have some demos, but really there's not a lot of time for much in the way of demos. There is so much for us to cover. My goal is make you aware of these options that you may not know about. And if I tried to demo each approach or the nuances within them, we'd never get done in the hour that we had, let alone in the 50 minutes that we now have. So let me just let this wash over you. You're going to hear a lot of opportunities to consider things. I'm going to point you to resources to learn more. You will be able to take the ball and run with it. And for those who've noticed that there's a lot of slides so far, I often have with these slides links, URLs, and you don't have to write them down. The slides that you're about to see are all online already at my website, carehart.org, specifically the presentation section. Just go to carehart.org/presentations, and there it is, already available. You can grab it right now and follow along if you like. You can skip ahead, get ready to catch me up on something. Anyway, I want to point out as well, like I said earlier, that all the online CF meetups are recorded. So this is being recorded, and it'll be available immediately after the session at the URL that you're watching now, and I'll post it on the recordings page for others to find, and it's also been shared in other places already. All right, quickly about myself. Some know, but let me just say quickly, I just focus on CF server troubleshooting, and by that I mean CF and Lucee server troubleshooting, and of course I mean server or not server. Let's not go down that road. But the point is, I'm an independent consultant, don't work for anybody, work with people of all sizes and experience levels, work remotely almost all the time, safe, secure, easy, shared desktop. And I can solve most problems you might bring to me in less than an hour, because this is all I do all day, every day. And I teach you as we go. So we not only solve the problem, but I try to help you know how to solve the problem. And if you don't find the time that we spend together is valuable, you won't pay for that time. So anytime you have trouble, reach out. I'm here to help. You can learn more about my rates, my approach, online calendar for booking me and all that at that site, carehart.org/consulting. I'm not selling anything this session. I'm just giving out information. That's what I do. All right, moving on. Okay, so what are these options? I've mentioned them in passing. We're going to cover them each in a little more detail. So you can run the CFML engine by a command box, first and foremost. Some people would say everybody should know that. I'm going to make sure that's the first thing we talk about. Second, you can install it. And again, some people, that's all they ever do. And that's what they want to know more about, but maybe especially to do automation, right? So we'll talk about if you install CF or Lucee and if you want to automate that separately from Commandbox. I'll talk about how you can containerize these things. And obviously, I'm not going to be able to get into, really getting into how do you go about deploying containers and what are the options. Those are whole talks on that. Each of these has talks. I'm going to tell you in a moment. One of these has 37 talks on it, or 27. So anyway, let's move on. We just, I'll give you resources for learning more. I'll talk about deploying your CFML engine via a WAR or an EAR file. And then I'll mention, as an honorable mention, you can run CFML without installing a thing via trycf.com or cffiddle.org. We'll talk about those briefly. And you can also run CFML via CLIs and REPLs, if you know what those are. So we'll mention that briefly. I want to ask before I go any further, does anybody think that this list doesn't cover the gamut? Now, remember, any of these could be deployed in the cloud or on a VM. That's not what we're talking about. I'm just saying, is there any way that one could deploy a CFML engine that I didn't think of? Because I don't mean that to sound snarky. I'm saying, I decided to put this talk together last week, and I thought, hey, let's just do it. And I've been working on it since last week. I could have missed something in my putting things together. Okay, we'll go for now. I definitely sincerely want to hear if I forgot something. I'm happy to modify the talk. And every one of these has options within them, as we'll see, and that's why they're worth talking about. You might go, well, that's all I need to know. Those are my choices. Okay, for some people it might be, but for most, they want to hear a little more. So that's what we're going to talk about. All right, so about Commandbox. Powerful tool that helps you to do this task for sure, running CFML engines easily, and a lot of other tasks. I mean, it really started out as another purpose, but it also can do that now. So and I didn't mean that to sound the wrong way. I'm saying when it came out, I don't think the focus was running other engines. It was a command line interface, right? It's Commandbox. And then it became clear that it could be much, much more. And it's grown over the years to be an incredibly powerful tool with a lot of capability. And anytime it doesn't do something that it should do, generally it's gotten added. And it's just amazing. I'm not at all knocking Commandbox here. We could literally spend days talking about it. And guess what? Brad has. And there's a 27-part CFcasts series. So at cfcasts.com, you could see 27-part Commandbox series that Brad did, or the docs are at commandbox.ortusbooks.com. And I'm going to leave it at that because trust me, you could spend all day digging into that. We cannot get into that now. I do want to say, if you didn't know, you can run any version of CF virtually, any version of Lucee. You'd be amazed how many there are, all the different variants and sub bullet points and snapshots. So anyway, and you can definitely run more than one. And you don't need to install CF or Lucee, not at all. And you don't even need to learn about using the zip or the WAR. But as I mentioned in passing, under the covers, what Commandbox does is implement a WAR of either CF or Lucee. But that hides that from you. You don't need to worry about it. But it's an interesting little side note. So once you get Commandbox installed, it's real simple. You just go get it, download it, implement it. The docs explain that. Again, we see the doc up above. You can just go to a directory where you've got some CFML code, or to a blank directory if you want. And you just say start, box start. Sorry, I should have clarified. If you haven't started getting into Commandbox, you'd say box start CF engine equals whatever. And you could say Adobe 2023, or you could say Lucee 5310, or all the different variants that it supports. And again, you'll be amazed at the variants that it supports. And if you didn't know, yes, CF 2023 came out last month, and there was a Commandbox implementation of it immediately. There was even one during the pre-release. So again, Commandbox rocks. The team behind it is awesome. They do wonderful things. And for some people, that's all that they'd want to know about. And for those who don't know about it, I'm letting you know that's how simple it is. And what it does is it creates a new internal web server ready to run your code. You just go to your browser, to the port, it'll be shown. There's a tray icon to help manage it. It'll even open up automatically in some ways. So anyway, and I want to point out too, before we wrap up, you can use Commandbox in production. So of course, it started out as primarily a developer tool, but you can use it for production. Now, one thing we should note is that because of the war file thing, that's not allowed to be used with ColdFusion Standard. Therefore, one cannot put in a ColdFusion Standard license into a CF instance running with Commandbox. It won't work. So you can't use ColdFusion Standard to run production in Commandbox. But anything else, yes, you can, absolutely. And in recent updates and improvements, you can now control the command boxes via your operating system services feature. There's support of multiple virtual hosts and server name indication, SNI. I think that's what it stands for. But anyway, I'll leave you to read more about that. But I got to move on. That was just one broad topic. Remember, we're going to cover several broad topics. That's one. I realize that some people would say that is not covering Commandbox with due respect. Well, it is with due respect, but it's not with due detail. Well, trust me, every one of these things I'm going to show you, I can't get into the details. So let's move on. If you're going to install CF, as some of you already know, but some do not know, when you run the installer for CF or Lucee, they can do it either via a GUI. If you have, a GUI, either Windows or Mac or Linux, you could do a GUI, or you could do it from the console. And in some OSs, when you run the install, it will just be a console, or you can tell the installer to run as a console. So some people will go, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know we could run it as console, even on a Windows or Mac. Yes, you can. Absolutely. And there are installers for CF. Let's be clear. I'm going to talk about CF first. There's an installer for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, and Solaris. So yeah, knock yourself out. For Lucee, there's an installer for Windows or Linux. And otherwise, people on Mac tend to use one of the other approaches that we're going to talk about, because there isn't a Mac installer for Lucee. At least that's been my understanding. I haven't seen it for a while. I believe that's still true. Again, not knocking it. I'm just saying, be aware if you're on a Mac, you might go, that's why I never knew. And no one to say this is important. That's why someone who's on a Mac who uses Lucee would go, I never use an installer. Well, it's because there isn't one. So you've got to use one of these other approaches. But the Windows people on CF have almost always never done anything but run an installer. And it's not that either one's wrong. It's just that they have different perspectives and experiences. And I'm just trying to say, hey, let's all come together. They all have their place. They each have strengths and weaknesses. Let's talk about them all. So as far as learning more about this, let me say that there is ample documentation about using the CF installer. And let me just hop over there real quick and show you. This is the page that I just linked to, the one on the URL. And I just want you to see, there's the screenshots. So it literally walks through each page of the installer, with sometimes having a link to explain more about what those things are. So I get it. Some people find installers annoying and they don't want to answer all these questions, or they think, I don't know what to do at this point. And I'll point out too, that these boxes that come up, sometimes they even have a link in them. And if you click that link, they go to the page that discusses things more. But the point is, there's lots to help you in the interface, in the docs. All right. So I want you to be aware. And then I did a talk a couple years ago on installing CF 2021 and issues about challenges with it and things to be aware of and decisions to make. And I'll do it again soon for 2023. It's time, with it came out last month. But anyway, so that's, again, ample coverage of some subtleties of that. As far as Lucee, there is that doc on that. No, actually, sorry. Oh, the reason why I didn't go there is there wasn't too much detail on there, but there is the doc that gets into it. So let's leave it at that. And there's the URL for it. Let me just look at it real quick. Am I going to be able to do that? I don't think I can highlight stuff here. Yeah, let's, in the interest of time, let me move on. There was some reason why I opted not to show it. I don't remember what it is, but point is, you can go visit it, and there's more coverage, and there's often links. Most of the Lucee pages have links to still more detail about different facets of things, so I'll leave you to look into that. I want to clarify again that the thing about the installers is that, of course, you could install it on your own machine. And for some people, that's all they do. But for others, they never do that. And you should know that, yes, you can install CF on your own machine, including for free for development. We'll talk more about that later. And that might surprise some of you. But moving on, for some people, it might be surprising to realize, oh, right, I could install it somewhere else. And others go, well, that's the only place I ever do is somewhere else. And that somewhere else could be in your network. It could be on a host that you pay for or somebody pays for. It could be in the cloud. You can implement it on a VM. And again, somebody might go, well, come on, these are like obvious. No, tell me, I'm telling you, trust me, they're not obvious to everybody, because people get in their siloed way of thinking and they don't think about options like these. And somebody might say, well, I hope you're not going to spend a lot of time on it. No, I'm not. I just want to put those options out there. And one last thing I do want to point out is for those that are on Windows, if you want to see what things are like running in Linux and you don't want to set up VMs, you don't want to set up Hyper-V or VMware or VirtualBox, there is a thing that Windows has called WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. It really ought to be called the Linux Subsystem for Windows, but they called it WSL. It is Linux within Windows, and it's not just a VM. It integrates with Windows in some very interesting ways. I don't want to get into that, but that's just an interesting way to also experience deploying CF on Linux or Lucee on Linux or Commandbox on Linux from within Windows and not using a VM in the way that might seem like to you you're using a VM. I just wanted to point that out. Okay, moving on. I'm going to give you a bonus topic about automating the installer, right? So we talked about one can run the installer and there is the full in the console mode, but some people never want to see or run an installer. They want things to be automated. They want a single thing that does it. Boom. And guess what? You can do that. Yes, there are ways that you can lead to a single step and CF or Lucee is installed. And maybe you want to package it and manage it with Ansible or Puppet, or you just want to run a script that just does it. Yes, you can do these things with CF and with Lucee. They both have options for that. And Commandbox is inherently automatable because it's command line things. So, that's, let's just, I'm going to talk about CF and Lucee. They, A or B, one, the first thing is they offer both of them what they call either silent or unintended installation. Yes, silent or unintended installation. And in the interest of time, I don't have to get into this. I'm going to show you. Here's the doc page that I just showed you, the link I gave you. This is the doc page on installing CF silently. And some will be like, oh, I've known about this for a year. And others will go, wait, what? I didn't know there was a silent installer for CF. Yes. And look at the scroll bar on the right. That's a really big page, about 15 pages. And you can just create a properties file that says you want to do a silent install and what's the serial number and what's the form of deployment and do you want to enable these features and on and on and on and on and on. Look at all those things that you could set in there. All right, so yes, you can silently install CF. It's one command pointing to one script file that does what to do. Boom, it's done. And Lucee has the same thing. They call it unintended install, and here's that doc page for that, installing Lucee in unintended mode. And it happens to be that I'm looking at the page that's talking about installing Lucee on Linux, so this is focused on Linux, but it applies more broadly. So I'll just leave it to you to say, yeah, check it out. Look again, you can pass in arguments to say, this is what I want this to be, this is what I want that to be. And so for some people, they're going to find that compelling. Others are going to go, I don't ever have to do that. Yeah, I get it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. It's an option. I just want you to be aware. It's an option. And then they've both got zip. We'll call it installers. They're not installers, right? What it is it's a zip that is CF or Lucee ready to go. You just extract the zip, ready to go. And they're very small. The CF one is 150 meg, which is a big deal compared to the installer, which is usually around a gig. And then Lucee is about 80 meg, half the size. I get it. Lucee is smaller. And part of it has to do with some things that Lucee or Adobe have bundled in. And I'll just clarify some more about that in a minute. Hold that thought. We'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, you just unzip them and go for the most part. Now, CF has this additional CF install script because they need you to accept the license and set the mode and stuff like that. So they make you do a couple things. But that too supports silent installation. So I want to be clear. You can use the zip with a silent install, and it's nothing but running the extraction of the zip, and then the CF install runs silently. Okay, so let's leave it at that. And there's the docs for that. And I just want to help you see there is docs on installing with the zip. This is all about the zip. And they show for Windows and Linux and Solaris and Mac OS. And then they talk about running that CF install, either SH or BAT. So again, I'll leave you to look into that. Okay, so that's automation of the installer. Just go that route. Now, the next thing is someone will say, well, okay, that gets CF for Lucee installed or Commandbox. And then what about the administrator? How can I automate configuration of the administrator? Well, absolutely. That's another important facet. And all these approaches support that. You do not have to go into the administrator for Lucee or ColdFusion. You don't have to. You can, or you could disable it and never show it. These are all options you have. And Commandbox offers a server.json file. And one of the things it can configure in its app section is admin level stuff, data sources, mapping, stuff like that. And then some of you know, and if you don't, you should hear this, Commandbox has actually a related tool. It's actually separate, called CFconfig. CFconfig. And again, we could do a whole talk on CFconfig. We don't have time. But CFconfig is an awesome tool. And CFconfig can automate management of admin settings in CF or Lucee. And it can export it to a JSON file, and you can move it by the JSON file and import it into some other machine. Awesome. Great stuff. I agree 100%. We could do a whole talk on that. That's not the point here. We're just saying, yes, you can automate the configuration of what some would call the administrator settings. Okay. And then Commandbox even offers the ability to do it via environment variables. Yeah, even just the basic Commandbox. We'll talk later about Docker containers. So there is a discussion of that in the docs, and I just want to show you. Here's the discussion of the server JSON, and down, way down, not way down, but I'm just saying, don't look at the top and go, oh, that's all about ports and stuff. No, I get that. But then, yeah, here in the middle, there's the app section with the stuff that you would typically think I want to put in the administrator. And then this whole CFconfig it's a whole big thing. I mean, that is something that you can take your time to read about. There's a whole book on it. But here I've highlighted what's called the config items. So this is what you can influence and change. And look, it's over 200 individual things that it can manage. And it's things that some people that use CF will recognize, and others maybe will never have seen before. And some might be only in Lucee or only in CF. But the point is, here's the list of all the things that it can manage. So CFconfig is awesome. Again, no time to cover it, but it is awesome. Check it out. And then I mentioned the server and variable overrides, and I didn't show that because it's straightforward enough. I'll just leave you to look at that. So check that out if you're interested in using environment variables to manage your configuration of engines in Commandbox. Now, some people who maybe only have ever used Commandbox or have only ever heard about doing things by way of Commandbox and CFconfig. And by the way, let me say, CFconfig, you don't have to use Commandbox. You can use CFconfig even if you never start an engine with Commandbox. You can use CFconfig against any CF or Lucee running that you've installed, or the zip or whatever. So again, I want to clarify, CFconfig is an awesome tool. Doesn't have to only be used with Commandbox engines, but it is a Commandbox module, so you have to install Commandbox, then you have to get the CFconfig. But that's not a big deal. I'm just saying, then you could point it at any CF instance. Well, CF 2021 said that's a good idea, and right, and some people will complain, yeah, that's them copying ideas. It goes all in every direction. Everybody's copying from somebody else about something. Let's move on. So CF 2021 and above offers a CF setup tool, CF setup, which is like CFconfig. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but I'm saying it's like it. And here's the discussion of that. And if I just do a Control P on that, it's 40 pages, 40 pages. This CF setup tool allows you also to configure via command line or a file, including a JSON file, all the settings in the admin. And it goes on to talk about all the different things, the sections. Basically, it's like it's broken up by the sections of the admin. And again, I'll leave you to read more about this. I'm not going to get into this either. I did do a whole talk on that. So if you're interested in that idea, go, whoa, I didn't know CF had a tool to automate configuration. Yes, it does. I did a talk on it, I think last year. There's the link to that. There's a whole hour on that. And I even showed that you can use it with other than CF 2021. Now, Adobe says on the top of the page, it's only for CF 2021 and above, but I showed it being used with 2018, 2016, 11, 10. I don't remember if I got it working with 9, but anyway, for many people, that would be enough. And so, yeah, you could use it to export settings out of CF 11 that you're migrating to CF 2022, 2023. And yes, there are people making that big of a leap. I help people in all kinds of ways, and there are all kinds of different variants where people are. So anyway, let's move on. Lucee also offers the ability to configure the administrator in an automated fashion via either you doing it in your application CFC. It lets you do a lot more things than even CF does in the application CFC. They both do mappings and they both do data sources, but it can do even more. We'll leave it at that. And then there's a CFadmin tag that only Lucee has, and it's not. It was like the original way, and it's kind of fallen in disfavor, but it's still there, and it's got a lot of capability. And I'll just tell you that this page right here, if you go to that page, it covers both doing things with the administrator CFC. Oh, sorry, that's not the application CFC. There you go. This is covering the application CFC. And then here's an administrator CFC, another subject. And then here's the CFadmin tag. So again, I'll leave you to come look into this if that interests you. We get a question, are there some guides to config with SSL for Commandbox? I think what you're saying is that you're using Commandbox and it's built-in web server. You need to be clear about this. If you mean it's using its built-in web server under the covers, you get these weird ports that it builds automatically for you. Are you saying you wish that use of that built-in web server supported SSL, HTTPS? I will say I don't know for sure. If anybody wants to chime in and answer them, feel free. But you may also be saying, no, I mean, Commandbox is running and I'm going to front it with Apache or IIS or Nginx. And then that's about configuring HTTPS for that. So I'm going to leave you to look into that more with those tips, or maybe somebody else can chime in. But I want to move on. It's really not directly related to what we're discussing here. Okay, moving on. And then I want to say that the Docker images, we'll talk about that in a moment. The Docker images also offer, virtually complete configuration by automation of admin settings using environment variables. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But it's on that subject of administrator configuration. And then before we wrap up this topic, I know we've just talked about installers, and let me just say we're going to speed it up in a moment. But there's also great modularity to both the CF and the Lucee installers. So if you get that CF zip, it is a small core, like I said, 250 meg, tiny little engine, the core engine, and you can add modules to it or packages. And you can add and remove modules from even a full install. It defaults to getting all the modules. That's one of the why it's big. It's got all the modules. And the modules are things like, the ability to produce PDFs, or the ability to call JDBC drivers, or the ability to call CFMail, or the ability to, virtually everything you do in CFML, if it relies on something, that thing can be optionally removed. And that's what some people have long said is like, hey, CF, it's a gig installer. I'm only going to do, a couple queries and outputs and maybe a CF HTTP. That's all I need. Man, I got to put up with all this gig of crap. No, you don't. Not since CF 2021. So you can get the zip and it's already small and just add what you need. You can get the full installer and yank out what you don't want. Okay. So that's all can be done through the CF administrator or through a tool called CFPM for package manager. CFPM. It's not really like NPM. Don't get excited, but just check it out. It's a tool, command line tool, SH, BAT, whatever. So the point is you can do that. Or again, environment variables for the Docker images can control what modules are implemented in the container. Yeah, it's awesome. And there's a whole doc page on it, and I'm going to go to that. This is the page about the package manager. And again, if I were to do the print thing, it's 17 pages. So don't dismiss this stuff. It's ample discussion about how to do CFPM and what is the core and what's installed and available and how do you use the admin and how do you use the command line. Okay, so I'll leave you to explore that on your own. And Lucee has a similar capability. Those who use Lucee already know it's got extensions. When you go to the admin, there's a page there called extensions. And just like in CF, you can add and remove, right? But Lucee was doing it first. I get that. But the point is they're both, for those that are into this stuff, OSGI. It's a underlying modularity capability that both engines implement. And Lucee's done it for a long time. And there's a whole page on that. And there's no point looking at it. It's nothing too interesting to look at. But the point is there's more about it if you didn't know. And then I want to point out, too, that some of you may know this. Lucee's got what they call the Lucee Lite jar, the Lucee Lite jar. That has no extensions at all, and it's only 20 meg. And so some people go, that's awesome. I want 20 meg. I don't even want 150 meg. I want 20 meg. Okay. They're just different engines, and they're implemented differently. Adobe hasn't gone that far. But there you go. And that's what underlies the serverless deployment called Fuseless. We'll talk about that later. All right. And then running more than one version at a time. I just want to wrap up this installing stuff to say, hey, about the full installer, you can definitely do it with other stuff, but with the full installer, you can run more than one version of CF at a time. Absolutely. The installer, I'm talking about CF first. The installer for CF creates for each version a new folder, a new service, its own JVM, all that stuff. And the name of the version is in the service by default. And if you have an old one running, when you install the new one gets new ports. So the two can run at once. And I do this all the time on every machine I have. I have CF now 2023, 2021, 2018, 2016, 11, 10, 9. I run them all on one machine. And in fact, I'll just show you real quickly. I've got my web server configured so that port 81 is going to ColdFusion 2021, and port 82 is going to 2018, and port 8078 is going to Lucee. These are all local hosts. They're all on the same machine. They're all running. And if we go look at Task Manager, it's not crazy. I've got this sorted by memory. There's ColdFusion using 400 meg, and that's CF 2018 using 400 meg. There's Lucee. It's Tomcat under the covers implementing Lucee, and that's using 300 meg. And then eventually there's the ColdFusion 2021 using 296 meg. And then down here is ColdFusion 2023 using 91 meg. I've got all of them running right now on one machine, and it's not overwhelming my machine. So I'm just saying, people often think it's not easy to do. There was a thread on the Facebook just the other day, Facebook CF programmers group, and everybody was saying Commandbox is the way to do it. And I'm not saying it's not the way to do it, but I'm saying, well, you don't have to do that. You can absolutely run more than one version of CF at a time. And when you first launch it, it even offers you to import optionally the old admin settings from the one version to the other. So you don't even need to use any tool. It just says, hey, I see you're installing 2021 on a box that had 2018 or 2016. And it goes, hey, do you want me to pull that in? And you can say yes, or you can say no. All right, moving on. Just note that to run them, of course, you have to have suitable resources, but I just showed you that it doesn't have to be crazy. It's really surprising. Some people would be shocked to hear that you could run more than one on a single machine. And then a big challenge is the web server connector configuration. You do need to be careful about that. You probably have your current sites pointing to the old version. And what you'll need to do is use the old version's web server config tool, WSConfig. Those who've done this stuff know what I'm talking about. You'll need to remove the old connections with the old WSConfig, and then you'd run the new version's WSConfig to point sites to the new version. It's really that simple, but I know if you don't know this stuff, it feels like it's difficult or impossible. Stuff breaks, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, let's move on. I want to wrap up this discussion of installers to point out, as I mentioned in passing, there are a couple of oddball CF installers. The ColdFusion Builder 2018 offers that option to install CF within the CF Builder folder. There's a doc about it. There's literally a page about it. I'm not going to go there, but yes, there is a option of a bundled ColdFusion within CF Builder. And I find that to be more trouble than it's worth. And they no longer do that with the new VS Code-based CF Builder. So if you are using the new VS Code CF Builder, this isn't a factor, but it was the old one. And if you didn't know, yes, Adobe has CF Builder for VS Code, and it's free. And I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. I'm going to do a talk on that because there's a lot of, I think, misinterpretation of some problems going on, and I'll help address those, but leave that for another time. I also want to point out that CF 2016 had what they called the Express installer, and it was smaller, but it wasn't modular. It was just a limited capability version of CF, and I think it even said you weren't to use it for production. I forgot to mention that, but anyway, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the zip installer. That is not the Express installer, even though it was implemented as a zip. They are different animals. So please, if anybody points you, says, hey, ColdFusion 2021's got an Express, or no, that's a different thing. And then the docs still mention it, and I've pointed it out to Adobe. I hope they'll remove it. But there's the doc about it if you want to read about it, and you'll see it's literally called Express. It's a different animal. All right. Now, as far as containerizing, I just want to say there are many options for containerizing CF, running CF as images in Docker or Kubernetes or anything else that supports containers. Both Commandbox, Commandbox has both CF and Lucee images. So I'm saying, for those who don't know, Commandbox is not just the command line tool that we all know and love. They also have packaged images that are ColdFusion or Lucee implemented in a way that Commandbox team has decided to implement them, and they've got their own way of doing some things, and they've got their own environment variables, and it leverages the CF config. And again, I'm not saying that to disparage anything. I'm saying it is different. Then Adobe has its own CF images for all these versions, and Lucee has its own images for several versions. And they're often called Docker images, but technically they can be used beyond Docker. So if you don't use Docker, don't let that be a reason to think, oh, I don't want to use that. No. Even for Kubernetes, these are what you would use. And each of them offers configurability via environment variables, and the ones that are used are different for each one. So just be aware they're going to be different. And I just want to point you to hub.docker.com. All three of them are at hub.docker.com. And then here's a doc page on using the Adobe ColdFusion images. For those who don't know that, there's an ample page about that. And then I did a presentation a couple years ago on comparing, I think maybe it was last year at CF Camp, I believe. It was on comparing CF Docker alternatives. I compared those three variants above and helped see how they differ and how they're similar and what challenges you might have and the pros and cons. That's a whole talk itself. So we don't have time to get into that. And then a couple years ago, and 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I did talks on getting started with running CF as Docker images and containers. So again, if you're interested in that subject, if it's new to you, go check those out. Or if you're a longtime user of one or the other, check out that one in the middle. I mentioned serverless deployment. Neither Adobe nor Lucee formally support serverless deployment of CFML. Sadly, no, they don't. Now, some will go, oh, yes, it does. Wait, no. For Lucee, Pete Freitag and others, sorry, that should have been et al. With one L, Pete and others created what's called the Fuseless project at fuseless.org. And that allows you to deploy CFML apps via Lucee on AWS Lambda. So it's just that. So it's only Lambda, it's only Lucee, and it's got its own quirks and limitations and challenges. And they admit that, and they addressed some of them and how they built it, and then they outlined some of them in the docs page. So I'll just leave you to look at that. Under the covers, it uses that Lucee Lite jar to make it be so small. And then they had to do some additional magic to make it work. So anyway, it's there. Check it out. It does not currently support CF. It's only Lucee. I want to point out that some will know that when CF 2021 came out, Adobe said, hey, we now support you deploying CF on AWS Lambda. And by the way, Lambda is also a feature of CFML and of languages. So we're not talking about Lambda as the feature in language of CFML. We're talking about AWS's serverless deployment architecture, which is called Lambda. I'm saying that Adobe did say at 2021's launch, they were going to allow that. And then they quickly removed it without any explanation. And I suspect it was about how do you price it? Like, how do they charge for it? So anyway, that's not further discussion here. But they did bring it back then about a year and a half later, but all they could do is call Lambda functions running in Lambda. And that's definitely not the same thing. So it's interesting, but it's not the same thing. Anyway, there's the URL for reading about it if you're at all interested in that. I'll leave it at that, and let's move on. Then deploying, and I know we're going to be a little late because remember we started 10 minutes late. I think we'll still be within that. If you guys are cool with going 10 more minutes, I don't think I'll need much more than that. You can deploy CFML option 4. We've gone through 3 options so far. Option 4 is deploying it via WAR and EAR files. And that's useful when you need to deploy your CF and or CF app and Lucee, CF or Lucee apps on a Java app server or servlet engine like WebSphere, WebLogic, Tomcat, JBoss, Jetty, Glassfish, and on and on and on. Some people work in environments where that's their architecture. And if you don't give them a package thing that runs in that environment, they don't want to talk to you. And by the way, Azure App Service, one of the features of Azure called App Service specifically, is based on deploying WAR files. They also have Azure things that are based on containers, and you can do Azure Cloud VMs, just like you can do AWS with containers and Cloud VMs. I'm saying the Azure App Service specifically is built on WARs. So it's an interesting concept for some people. And WARs are web archive files, WAR, web archive, and EARs are enterprise archive. And these both go back 15 to 20 years in the Java servlet engine, J2E, JEE space. And we don't need to say anything more than that. It's just a way to package Java-based apps as a single file. It's a zip called a WAR file that's packaged a certain way. And both CF and Lucee support WAR files. And CF, let me talk about that first, offers multiple ways to obtain or create a WAR or an EAR file. First of all, you can go to Adobe's website And when you go there to download ColdFusion, you'll see that one of the options they offer, either on that page where you get the form or after you fill in the form, there's a link to just get the WAR file. And if you go to the downloads page, if you know what I'm talking about, if you just Google ColdFusion downloads, that first page that comes up, I believe it offers links to them. The point is, you can just download them. You can also build them from within the CF installer. When you run the full installer, command line or console, one of the first questions is, oh, do you want me to deploy a server deployment of ColdFusion, a standard thing that everybody's used to? Or do you want me to build a WAR file? I can do that. Or an EAR file. I can do that. So that's a choice during the installer. Yeah, you may have never used it, but that's an option. And then check this out. Some have never noticed it. If you go into the packaging and deployment section of the administrator, one of the buttons there says, and by the way, this would only be in enterprise or standard now that I think about it. In enterprise or standard, it would say, hey, I can create a WAR file out of what we are right now with the admin settings that we've got right now. I can do that for you. So that's pretty cool and interesting. Some people might like that. And before I move on, Mark has asked, as for Adobe at launch of 2021, they offered. Oh, okay. Maybe that was before I covered it, or maybe you missed it. But yeah, I covered that. Okay. So there's the doc page on installing the J2E configuration, and I won't go there in the interest of time, but it's ample. It's got a lot of stuff in it. In fact, it covers deploying it on WebSphere and WebLogic and Jetty and ClassFish. So I don't think it's everyone, but it's several of them. It has discussions of each of them. So if you're deploying CF on one of the supported engines that they've documented, you'll find ample discussion showing exactly how to do it. And then Lucee also offers a WAR for each build. So if you go to the download site for Lucee, there will be, one of the choices is a WAR file for every build they create. And there's a doc page, which isn't just about the WAR files. Notice it's about Tomcat and Lucee on OS X using the Lucee WAR file, but it covers the concept generically. And you can, if you're interested in that, read about that. So I'll leave you to that. And then again, they offer the jar only option, and they do both a light jar and the full jar. And that's a separate subject. And that's just another way to deploy CF, but it's Lucee. And I'll leave you to dig into that if you're interested in that. Now, moving on. With all of these things, you have to deal with web server integration, some web server in front of your CFML, right? Something's got to run it. And Lucee and CF both have their own built-in web server, often abbreviated the BIWS for built-in web server. And most use it just for the administrators, but you can use it to run your code. And yeah, you could even run it in production. That's another discussion. Some people would say, no, it's only for development. No, it's not true. They're the Tomcat web server, and the Tomcat web server is not development only. People that say that are thinking of the old days before CF10 when it ran on JRun, and the JRun web server was not suited to production, but the Tomcat web server is. But anyway, that's another whole topic. I got a blog post on it, but this is not the time to discuss that. You'll typically want to front your CF or Lucee with an external web server like IIS or Apache and so on. And for CF, you'd run the wsconfig tool, as I mentioned before. For Lucee, there's a mod CFML tool, and it even calls it automatically within the installer if you choose to go that route, or you can run it yourself. And then for those using Lucee with IIS, there's the bond code IIS connector tool. And by the way, that works with CF as well. Very few people would use it because the CF wsconfig tool is just better documented by Adobe, but you could use bond code with CF, absolutely. I also want to throw out that some people will go, I don't need to use any web server at all. And you're absolutely right. You could skip that thing called AJP that those three tools rely on and just forward to the built-in web server. You could do it from Nginx and Apache and IIS. If you implement the ARR feature, you can forward from them to the ColdFusion or Lucee built-in web server. And in fact, that's the way load balancers can work, and ingress controllers do work, like HA proxy and traffic. They would point, typically, they wouldn't like go through a web server. They'd go, well, not say they would, but they could just go, hey, I'm not going to bother with Apache. I'm not going to bother with Nginx. I'm not going to bother with IIS. No, I'm just going to go right to that built-in web server. It's already there. Let me just use it. And then the question is, are those suitable for the features you want? Do they do rewrites? Do they suitable secure? Can you control IP address, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's between you and those tools. But I'm just saying it's an option. And I'm just saying that when we talk about deploying CF in all these different ways, the web server becomes its own discussion. And this applies to all the ways I've talked about. I also want to say that some people, even in 2023, are still only working in production, and they edit against that. And of course, that's a no, don't do that. Highly discouraged for so many reasons. Just please consider these other options I've talked about to implement CFML, some engine for you that's suited to you in development, please consider doing that. It could be your local machine. It could be a remote machine. It could be in the cloud, whatever. Just do something. Don't do production editing of code. And I know there's pros and cons and there's challenges and, hey, they can't connect to the same database. Or what if it's the same? I don't want to mess with the database. But yeah, you got to have a development version of the database. I get all that. That's something to think about. But just seriously, think about having local development versions of the things you're doing. And consider a test platform between the local development and prod elsewhere. Some people don't do that. They just have local dev and they have prod and they just move from one to the other. You should consider a test platform that better mimics your prod. But yeah, this is getting to some people way beyond what they want to deal with. And one of the biggest issue about all this is licensing. And I just want to say development, CF's development edition is absolutely free. Anybody can go get the CF installer or zip or run the Docker or the WAR file and run all that with the developer edition for free. Absolutely. Don't have to pay Adobe a dime. Some people have never paid Adobe a dime. And test and staging and QA can be free depending on whether you have enterprise or standard, and there's a whole discussion of that. And then containers have their own licensing, and I have a blog post on that. So I'm just saying these are all subjects worthy of their own discussion. I grant Lucee is free, entirely free for production. CF has these issues that you have to think about. Honorable mention, and this will be the last big topic, is you can run CFML entirely online with no install at all, first via fiddles. So if you haven't heard of it, cffiddle.org is a place where you can go. And there's fiddles for lots of languages out there. And this is the one for CF. And it's, look, you just go to cffiddle.org and it's right there. And you could say, you know, CF output. All right. Notice it even filled in the completion, and I can hit run, and it's showing me the current time. And I can switch between 2021 and 2023 and 2018. And then some will go, well, I've never used that because I use trycf. So trycf.com, same sort of thing. And it presumes to have you write script. And I'm just going to copy and paste my code over here and plunk that in place over top of that. And you can just hit enter or control enter, and it runs it. And I want to point out it supports, now that's interesting. I don't know what syntax error I have there. I might have left something in there. No, I don't see what's wrong with that. It says there's an error, but let's don't get hung up on that. Something weird's going on. I don't want to take time to look into it. But you can run that against Lucee, Lucee 5, Lucee 4, Lucee 6 beta, Rilo, ColdFusion 21, 2018, 2016, 11, and 10. So trycf is really awesome. So they're both there. And again, I don't know why that didn't work. It's got to be something I'm not seeing, but I don't want to take time to worry. I've used it. Many have used it. Trycf.com. And then lastly, you can run CFML via a CLI or a REPL, read, evaluate, print, loop. And even with those, there's many options. Commandbox is inherently a CLI, and it was a REPL from the beginning, and it's very capable. And then CF, in 2016, they added the ability to at least call CF pages from the command line. No need to install it. And then in 2018, they enhanced it to be a REPL. So it is truly a REPL. And if we had time, I'd show it. But you could like go into it, and just like that, you could start writing code. And the way a REPL works is if you like set a variable to a value, it shows you on the next line, okay, that value's been set to, that variable's been set to this value. And the other, you could run an evaluation. It shows the result of that evaluation. So again, that's what a REPL is. I'll leave you to read more about that. Here's the docs on that. It's a full, elaborate document on using the command line interface as enhanced in CF 2018 and how it's a REPL. And there's lots of pages of documentation on that. And then Lucee has also got a CLI, and there's the docs on that. And here it is, and how to run a CLI for that. I'll leave you to dig into that more on your own. So yeah, lots of ways. And I've given you links throughout, and each topic really does have ample docs, whether they're from Adobe or from Lucee or from other folks or blog posts or presentations that people have done. And of course, consider leaning on the community that you work with. There are several communities out there. I want to tell you, if you didn't know it, some people that are even watching the CF Meetup kind of work by themselves and maybe don't really interact with the community because they don't know about options. There are many options, from a Slack channel for CF and Lucee, so CFML Slack, to a Facebook CFML programmers group and a LinkedIn CF group and the forums at Adobe and the community, the dev.lucee.org. Again, I don't want to list them all. This page that I've got here is a page where I do list them all. If you just go to cf411.com, it's got about 100 categories, and one of the categories is CF Community Help. So if you just go to that URL, you get taken right to the page about CF Community Help. And then I'm available to help. I'll help free for quick questions. I do it all the time, all day, every day. And then I do it on a consulting basis. And I try to be fast and short on those, and often can solve problems in less than an hour. And my minimum charge is 15 minutes. I can solve pretty much any problem that's brought to me. And if I can't, and you don't feel the time was valuable, you won't pay for it. So just lean on me. I'm here to help, and in both ways. So that's that. Yeah, right on time. Cool. So, if we'd started on time, I would have been finished on time. So there are so many ways to deploy CFML or test it, if you want to call it that, run it. And some do involve installing, but some don't, right? We've talked about ways that don't even involve installing. And they can be done on other than your own machine. So don't think, oh, I can't do any of these because my machine doesn't do X, or my OS isn't supported, or well, there's all kinds of reasons people say I can't do it. I hope you've seen now, maybe there's ways you could do it. That's my goal here. And some of them don't require any machine at all that you have to pay for or control. And then some of them may be new to you. Maybe you didn't know about the zip features. Maybe you didn't know about Commandbox. Maybe you didn't know you could do containers with WAR files, all right? So it's good to know that those options are there and for you to be able to pick what option is best for you. And that was my goal today, just to make you aware of all these options. And as you can see, no time to really demo everyone, but to point you to where you can find ample screenshots and everything walking through. So I've given you the push. Now you can take that bike and ride on. All right. So that's it for me. I'm going to look now to the questions and comments. And thank you, everybody. If you got to go, apologies for going 10 minutes over. We started 10 minutes late. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and hope you enjoyed the talk. Now to the questions. CF1011, I fear no security hole. Right? I guess you're telling, yeah, he's making the point that if somebody tries to run those, they're being bold or foolish, right? That's his point. Someone who thinks they fear no security, because trust me, you do not want to be running 10 or 11 in production. Just don't do it. 9, 10, 11, 2016. 2016 last got its updates in 2021. And CF 2018, I did a blog post on this late last year, early this year. CF 2018 gets its last updates next month. Right? 2018 plus 5 is 2023. That's next month. Next month is the end of updates to CF 2023. And when that happens, it doesn't mean that that day you're going to be vulnerable, because there's probably not going to be another update in July necessarily for CF 2021 or 2023. But when they come out with an update for 2020 or 2023, maybe like the throw out a number, maybe they come out in September. Well, when they come out with an update in September, now you who are on 2018 will not get that update. You will not get that fix. And then you will be running a security risk. But yeah, sadly, there's a lot of people still running on CF 10, 11. Crazy. Is there a Jupyter notebook for CF? I'm not aware of any. Good, interesting question. If somebody's got an answer, feel free. Good. Scott said yes just recently. There's been some work on that. And if there's anything you want to share to help him to understand where to find out more about that, I'm sure he'd appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Right. Hopefully you're just joking, Nicholas, but you could be having to do it. I understand. And I trust, I work with people in all those facets. Is there an ARM64 Docker image for CF? Gosh, I don't remember now if that was finally taken care of. Let's just look real quick, because that was a long-standing problem. Where's what was it? Oh, just Docker. And look, oh, come on. I shouldn't have to log in. ColdFusion. So for those who don't know, you just go to Docker Hub, search ColdFusion. First things that come up now are Adobe's CF 2021, Adobe's without a name. So it's 2023 currently. You can pass a tag or label, what do you call it? A tag, and it will get 2023, 2021, 2018. There's 2018. And yeah, no, not ARM. So no, currently still no ARM support. That's what this page tells you, that they don't currently yet support ARM. I thought there was some discussion about that. And I wouldn't put it past things to be inaccurate for some reason, but it may still be that no, there's no ARM. I think what I'll tell you is that I believe they did add ARM support for the Mac installer. I think that's what I'm thinking of. The Mac OS installer for CF 2021, and sometime in 2022, they came out with a new installer and it supported ARM. I'm pretty sure of that. So anyway, let's move on. No Docker images, I think. And no more CF 2016 images for CF. They don't offer those anymore. And they'll probably soon stop offering the 2018 ones. But for now, they're still there. They used to have them, but no more. What's the biggest difference in the Ortus? Well, like I told Scott, so he says, what's the biggest difference in the Ortus and Lucee Docker images? I can't recount right now what that is. I'll tell you that I covered that in a talk that I did last year, I believe. I gave the link earlier in the presentation. That presentation went over the Adobe CF images, the Lucee CF, Lucee images, and the Commandbox Lucee and CF images, and I discussed in elaborate detail with tables about each. So yeah, check that out. And yes, you can make your own image, absolutely. And I'm going to be putting some together soon about that. And there's also some resources out there. In fact, there is I believe it's a GitHub project where somebody does put together a CF 2016. He did it 7 years ago. He put together a CF 2016 image showing using the installer command line variant of the installer to just do everything in a Docker file. So one could do that, and you might even find that resource. If you can't find it, send me an email. All the screens have shown my, let's go back to the screen for a second. Down in the bottom right corner, you can reach me via Twitter. You can reach me by emailing me, charlie@carehart.org. That's offered all over the place. Under the covers, it's Java, so it should run on ARM. Yes, and it's usually more about how it's packaged and whether it's packaged suitably to that processor. And, let me just throw this out too. I know we're near the end of our time, but someday soon, well, it already has happened. There's going to be yet another Mac OS version, right? Or there's going to be a new Windows. I don't know if it's going to be Windows 12 or Server 2025. There's going to be some new OS, new variant, Ubuntu 26 when it comes out. 2024 has already come out, right? Anyway, moving on. When there's a new variant of an OS and everybody screams and hollers, I can't believe this installer doesn't work. In almost all cases, it's just the installer that doesn't work. It's not that CF wouldn't work. I'm talking about CF now. It's not that CF won't work. It's that the installer, which is an install anywhere installer that Adobe licenses to build the installer, it's that sometimes has in it a check for the OS. And it says, hey, I don't recognize that. I only support these. And they can't anticipate what the future ones will be. And they can't promise that it could work on the future one. So they just go, I give up. I can't work on that version. And so sometimes any of these other options is kind of a variant of what you just said. Under the covers, it's all Java. Well, you don't have to use an installer, right? If I just showed you how to use the zip, hell, you could take the zip and install it on some new flavor of an OS. And you can do that with CF, with Lucee, and of course, Commandbox, if they support that, right? Because that's where Commandbox is its own environment. It's got to support that thing. And if it doesn't support it, then you won't be able to use Commandbox. But they're always on top of it. The day it comes out, there'll probably be one. When there's a beta, they're probably working on it in advance. It's just an unfortunately, CF in particular, they don't do that. In fact, they don't do it the day it comes out. They don't do it the week or the month it comes out. Sometimes they don't do it the same year a new OS comes out. It can literally take a year, and that's sad. But the fact is, good news, I should have thought of this as a benefit. You could do the zip. You can, of course, do the Docker. You could do any of these other variants. And even though the installer doesn't work. Now, I want to repeat, that doesn't mean that they support it, right? That doesn't mean it's all going to work until Adobe says we support that new OS. You can't know it's going to work, but as you said, it's Java under the covers, and it's, simple to install. I'm not sure what yes M1 was an answer to. Maybe somebody asked a question, but yes, M1 is another way of referring to ARM processors. Okay, whew. So we're about 7 minutes beyond the time we started. So it looks like all the questions are petering out. if anybody's got one that they're feverishly typing, take a moment to cut it to the clipboard and just say, hang on, and then I'll wait, and you can paste it back in and continue typing. And I'll wait about a minute. And I want to repeat while we wait for things to settle down, I sincerely want to hear from you, whether you reach out to me via Twitter or Slack or LinkedIn or Facebook or any of the social medias out there. Email's best because I can miss stuff. Otherwise, I don't live in all those places, but I live in email. Charlie@careheart.org be the best way to reach me. I want to hear any feedback. I want to hear anything I forgot. I want to hear any stress I made that shouldn't have made, didn't stress that I should have stressed, anything. This is the kind of topic that can generate feelings. So I want to hear them. Cool. Thank you, Josh. All right. If that's it, then let's go ahead and call it. I'm hearing bings from Slack already. People obviously sending me messages. I'm not looking at it because I'm focused on you guys, but I've enjoyed giving the talk, and I look forward to the next one. And we will have one next week. If this is not going to matter in years from now or months from now, but if you're watching live or seeing this week, next week, June 15th, we're going to have another talk already scheduled from a company that does a load testing tool called Octoperf. And we'll have that talk a week from today, and I'll be doing more of these. I'm going to start putting them out there. I've been dragging my feet because it takes time to put them together, and some people would say, don't do any slides, just go, but you still got to organize your thoughts. So anyway, the point is these things do take time, and but I'm just going to start committing to them, put on the schedule, and I will get them done, which is what I did with this one. I've got several immediately topics in my head that I want to do, and then I could list literally 100 more that I look forward to doing, and ones I did in the past that are due to be updated. So look forward to hopefully many more. My plan is to do many more talks here on the Meetup. And if others want to come on in. I'm happy to serve the people that are here. And if nobody else wants to do it, I don't get it, but okay. Just know the door's open. Come on in anytime you want to give a talk. There's an audience waiting, and 3,000 member list in the Meetup, ColdFusion Meetup, that will get notified about whatever it is you want to discuss. So just that notification alone, even if people don't see your talk, might be of value to you. All right, let's call it a day, and until the next time, see ya.